In the e-commerce environment and in retail, to be successful and grow those businesses, you have to understand operations, you have to understand technology, and you have to be a strategic thinker, and you have to use data and be data driven and know the consumer. So you have to do all those things. So what I recognized pretty early on is that companies would think, or they would employ me thinking they had a marketing problem. But I quickly realized that may be one thing, but I could go in the role of CMO and just focus on marketing and stay in one lane. But marketing and sales actually touch all areas of the company.
Let's talk about your business. What's, in your perspective, in your own business, the toughest challenge that you've had to overcome?
I think there's an assumption that you need to spend more money on marketing to grow. An unpopular thing that sometimes needs to be done to get the balance sheet turned around is to pause spending on marketing and actually figure out the positioning to get it right.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the CEO After Dark show. Today I'm really excited to have Rose Hamilton with me. Rose is the founder and CEO of Compass Rose Ventures, where she helps some of the coolest and best health and wellness brands grow, scale, and most importantly, figure out how to exit. Rose, it's great to have you here.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. I'm excited to spend some time with you.
Do you mind telling us a few words about what you do these days?
Yes, I'd love to. So I have the absolute joy and pleasure of working with some of the most innovative, most interesting, brilliant founders and investors in businesses that cover the categories of health and wellness, which of course encompasses vitamins and supplements, pet, food and beverage, and also beauty. So those particular categories are just, they're amazing with so many unique brands and different innovations and content to be created to get out to the world. So what we do as we're working with these businesses is help either get a business positioned for investment, or they might already have investment and they're trying to figure out how to scale and grow. So we do quite a bit of work at the intersection of technology, marketing, and operations. And of course, balancing it very carefully with the financials to help these businesses grow profitably. And we also do quite a bit of turnaround work as well for businesses that are iconic, maybe have had a founder for 20 years, the founder exits, then it's a little challenging when it's not founder-led anymore. And those are the businesses that I think are so interesting, because if they've got great products, a great legacy to them, and they're iconic, figuring out how in today's world to reach their consumers and help them grow and position is so fascinating to me. We love the work that we do.
There's so much to ask, but I just want to take a step back and ask you, like, how did you start with this? Because I think you've had a very strong corporate career as well in the past.
Mm-hmm. I've had the pleasure of working on businesses like Best Buy and Taylor, Chico's, the Vitamin Shop, Pet 360, which was acquired by PetSmart. So all brands that were very consumer focused. And in all of my positions, I've been digital first. I was really born in the digital era. So thinking about omni-channel strategy and being in positions of almost being an entrepreneur in these businesses, where I was inventing things as technology came up, constantly adapting and figuring out how to use the data, the technology, the social platforms, content creation to help advance the businesses that I was in and figure out how to integrate the new technologies in. So as I went through, I worked with some pretty big businesses that I just mentioned, but I had this really pivotal moment when a founder of a 17-year-old business that was about 30 million approached me. I'd never worked on a business that small before. And he had just gotten into the chair as the CEO and had a great investor, and they were ready to exit, in the next 3 to 5 years. And so I went into this business called Pet Food Direct, had the honor of working with the founder and an incredible leadership team there. And we built that business to 150 million and then exited to PetSmart. And so that experience drew me closer to suppliers, obviously of pet products, and to content creators and to influencers. And so we really took a business that was strict direct to consumer, no retail outlets, and transformed it to become community, commerce, and content. So some of our revenue came out of the media business. And we had this amazing opportunity. I was the CMO in the role that I played, but an amazing opportunity to really use consumer insights to reposition this brand and rename it to be Pet 360. So just the joy of my career. I had the most fun there that I think I've ever had until now. And in the middle, I had a little stop at the vitamin shop and went into a position as chief digital officer. So I had loyalty, marketing, digital, e-commerce, anything that was marketplace related. And there I had an interesting experience because I got the opportunity, given that the vitamin shop is pretty much an incubator in a lot of ways for startup, smart, innovative brands within the health and wellness space. I got the opportunity to work with many of them. And as I started to learn to meet these founders, both at Pet Food Direct, Pet 360, as well as at the vitamin shop, I met founders who would say, I'm a scientist and I know my products, but I don't know how to grow and scale this. Like, can you give me some tips? So it wasn't long before I had a couple investors call me and say, hey, can you help us with some due diligence? We're looking at some businesses that you've got experience in. Then I had a couple of founders approach me and say, can you help me with my go-to-market strategy? I'm getting ready to launch something new. And so it suddenly occurred to me, I'm fascinated by this health and wellness space and the pet space and the beauty, the CPG space, consumer product goods, consumer packaged goods. And there are founders who really need the skill set that I had honed and developed and that I'm so passionate about and just needed help. Everything from operations to technology to digital to marketing to positioning, branding. And it occurred to me I could probably add a lot of value if I focused my efforts on serving founders and investors who are at any stage in their journey, actually. That's how it all began. I did a lot of work with startups in the early days. The business has been around for about 7 years now. And it was just me and a partner coming up with the concept and the idea, intentionally calling it Compass Rose Ventures because navigation was a challenge. Rocky waters, consumers always changing, dynamic marketplaces. So we like to be the compass that helps to navigate businesses towards their North Star. And all the elements and the challenges and the weather challenges along the way on their journey is what we get to participate in. And now we've grown to really have a chapter of our business that is focused on technology and data. Another chapter that is focused on operations, because that seems to be a challenge in a lot of the companies we work with. And then there's marketing, and certainly working with CFOs in finance and figuring out, and CEOs and founders, how to look at their investments, whether it's marketing or technology, how to build their roadmaps, and how to think about investment and how to be a value, how to create value in these organizations that then eventually sells and exits. And kind of everybody goes off into the sunset. At least that's the plan with most of the companies that we work with.
As I hear you talk, Rose, one thing stands out to me quite a lot. The most common advice that people say, like give to people that start some sort of new venture, is that they should specialize and do one thing only. They will say, for example, one service, one target market, like that sort of thing. Yet, while I hear you talk, it feels like what you have done so successfully is almost like connect the dots between many different things rather than
Yep.
just focus on one single thing. And I think that might be why you're so well positioned also to work with those large companies. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I was always encouraged to focus on one thing in my career. And I was always tempted to try to deviate and go out of digital and out of marketing. But I stayed there, and I'll share with you why. Because in the e-commerce environment and in retail, to be successful and grow those businesses, you have to understand operations, you have to understand technology, and you have to be a strategic thinker, and you have to use data and be data driven and know the consumer. So you have to do all those things. So what I recognized pretty early on is that companies would think, or they would employ me thinking they had a marketing problem. But I quickly realized that may be one thing, but I could go in the role of CMO and just focus on marketing and stay in one lane. But marketing and sales actually touch all areas of the company. And you've all got to be rowing in the same direction in a boat. And so I think the secret sauce for me was knowing consumer and data really well. I would never change my path on that. Learning the financials and working with a just fantastic CFO who helped me understand the importance of how you move levers in a P&L that then allows that positioning for us to go in and really touch all aspects of a company comfortably.
Mhm.
So it really, I do encourage people to stay focused, but find those partners who can help you in the areas where you've got, I'd call it blind spots. So, as
Mhm.
I described, you might have an awesome scientist or a doctor who's innovated a really great product, but they don't necessarily know the marketing, the operations, the technology side, or how to make those choices. And so it's so helpful to be able to work with them where I'll never be an expert on ingredients and the solutions that need to be created. But if you're an expert on the consumer and really digging in there, all the other parts that make the growth plan work start to stitch together. And oftentimes when we're in companies, we'll hear, oh, we thought you were marketing. Oh, we're going to be touching lots of things on our roadmap. Yep, that's exactly right, because it takes all parts for the flywheel to go.
Interesting. This is very interesting. Um, One of the things that you told me is that a lot of the brands you work with eventually hit plateaus, and then like you come in and help unlock them. What's usually holding brands back? And just to make this easier, let's think of a context of a brand that's, I don't know, like stuck at 50 million, for example,
Mhm.
and it's like trying to go to 100 million type of run rate. What's
What
holding them back?
I, yeah, what I observe time and time again is that once you hit that plateau, you've usually lost touch some way with the consumer. So as a company builds and grows, you have your roots. You have the way you did things in the early stages. And usually the owners, founders were really close to the customer and the consumer, like packing boxes and shipping them out from their garages. But once you get bigger and you hire more people, it's easy to get caught in your own ways in the way we've always done things. And it's easy because you're so close, you're in the business every day. People don't necessarily have the time to work on the business. And that strategic thinking and coming up a level to really look at, is our positioning right? What's going on with competition? Who do we want to be? Are we true to our mission? Are we true to our values? That oftentimes gets lost in the sauce as you start to grow. So, one of the first things we do when we work with companies is take about 6 weeks and go in and really, I'm going to use the word audit. We do an inventory of lots of materials and we do some discovery with them. But the whole goal of it is to pinpoint where the strengths are that need more attention and where the weaknesses are, the gaps are that could actually be value creating if we could get our arms around them and get some action going towards them. And I think the minutia of feeling stuck and lost and not growing and moving, it's helpful to have an outside party to come in. And I know I had it many times when I was in the chairs that I was in corporate, having somebody outside come in, give a holistic look at it, look at the data, look at the results, look at the performance, look at the positioning, and then you tweak it. And so usually after we get done with that audit, we come out with our observations, our recommendations, and our roadmap. And then we determine out of our toolkit in the rocky seas and waters, what shall we pull out? Is the first thing we need to do maybe a listening lab or consumer research? Do we need to get in touch with the consumer if we haven't done that in a while? Or do we need to look at positioning and the brand identity because we've lost our way maybe with how we look in the market compared to competition? Or do we need to get all the data that we're sitting in, assembled in a way that we can find the trends and find the opportunities within the data? So sometimes it's a data related project to figure out how to unlock. And sometimes it's even culture and it's mindset where you may have lost the way if people have been at a company for a long time. The innovation and entrepreneurial spirit can sometimes get lost too. So some of it can be cultural and training and teaching teams how to think about things differently and how to bring the entrepreneurial spirit into the DNA of a company where they may be thinking really big and acting really big, but they actually need to bring in that entrepreneurial piece to help them scale and grow and break out of their mold.
How about a specific example? And let's make it even more specific. When it comes to a turnaround, where you had to make like difficult decisions, like is there anything that comes to mind? Because I think people learn best through examples.
Yes, a very specific example. Um, I think there's um, an assumption that you need to spend more money on marketing to grow. And an unpopular thing that sometimes needs to be done to get the balance sheet turned around is to pause spending on marketing and actually figure out the positioning to get it right. So recently, there's some work that we did with a company that was a turnaround, and clearly kept spending money. Return on ad spend was going down. And then when we went and actually walked their store, their online store, and their presence in a physical environment, we took a step back and said, well, wait a minute, we're spending all this money. And when I look at the performance of what's actually happening in sales and marketing, we're not moving the needle. So what happens if we cut some spend, put it to the side, and get the positioning done properly and get the plan laid out and understand we're going to focus on profitability right now. So instead of trying to throw money away down the sink, which is clearly what's happening, let's go unlock why we're not resonating with the consumer. And let's get ourselves repositioned, get the assets right, get the media mix right, and pause on spending all the traditional media that really probably needs to take that money and flip it around differently. So give ourselves time, give ourselves 3 months, shave a bunch of expense out, preserve the cash, work on the positioning, work on the new direction, and then launch. And that's not something most businesses or investors are willing to do. Like they just want to keep growing and keep trying. But I'm a big fan of saying you get to spend the dollar once, and once it's gone, it's gone. And it is far better to look at profitability than to keep throwing money after something that's just not working.
I'm assuming that you have probably had some pushback when it comes to things like that from companies. Can you tell
Yes.
us like some like a story maybe around like a conversation? How does this conversation usually go? Because again, in my experience, and as you said yourself, people don't really want to stop
Uh-uh.
putting money in marketing so easily. So how do you
Yes.
navigate this?
Well, number one step is to get aligned with the investors and the CEO and the founder. Like that, you got to start at the top in these sorts of cases and create alignment on here's where the challenges lie. And you've got an option. We can keep going down the path we're going on and lose money, or we can redeploy it when we actually put it in the right places. And most of the time, the investors and the CEO and the founder, as long as everybody gets comfortable with managing expectations, it's okay. Then the harder part is expressing it throughout the organization because, of course, people get upset if they're marketing dollars, they don't have them, we're not going to hit our numbers. And so, especially in an environment where there are retailers, or it's not it's not a retailer scenario, it could be a manufacturer scenario, having the conversations with the distribution partners becomes important, and being able to take that roadmap that I mentioned with here's what we're going to be doing, this is what's happening, and almost doing a road show. Internal marketing becomes so important in those cases, both getting your team aligned, but then getting your partners aligned, that we may see some softness in sales while we're going through this period of time. But this is where we're going, and getting buy-in from everybody. So you're all on the same page with what you're doing and why. And most importantly, saying these are the milestone markers that we're going to be looking for. And this is how we're going to be judged. And I will say, I learned that trick of that trade when we needed money to relaunch Pet Food Direct for Pet 360. We had to ask for money. And I remember distinctly recall my CFO saying, if you're going to do this rebrand, you're going to have to get money around it and you're going to have to fund it. So figure out the model and how you're going to fund it and get the support that you need. And I will forever remember that, because that now travels with me into everything I do and every business that I touch, is making sure we get really good understanding of why the business isn't growing. And if the marketing isn't actually not working, we got to fix that. Sometimes though, the challenges might be we're not getting people to want to distribute our product. So sometimes we might need to get sales and marketing going in a different way with different positioning to get people on board. So, again, I use the example of it's a lot of internal skills, being able to get people rallied around here's what the data is telling us, here's what the consumer is telling us, here's the white space. We want to go play there. Because if we keep playing where we are and the competition is coming after us, it's going to be a downward spiral. And we've got to stop that and create that burning platform that gets everybody excited about the vision in the future.
I want to understand the full scope of the engagements that you take, because as I understand, there's the initial discovery and audit phase, and then there's the recommendations. But what happens after the recommendations? Do you and your company help with implementation of those recommendations also?
We do. I think that's one of the things that's unique for us because while we bring the business background and we can assess the business and understand what to do, we also bring the execution capabilities and the action capabilities. And that's where operations plays a really big part. So we're not an agency. We don't think of ourselves that way. We think of ourselves as advisors, but advisors who action. And in some cases, we will go in if there's a situation where a leader's left or there's a lot of turnover, and we might actually manage a team for a period of time while we're getting it, call it CMO proofed. Sometimes that's a role that we've played through the years where the organization, it becomes whoever the founder leader is, along with Compass Rose and the team, overseeing a part of the business so that we get it proofed, future proofed for the new leaders that we're going to introduce into it versus hurrying up and going and hiring extra talent. Sometimes you need to get the people, the process, the system set to scale and to be ready to bring different talent in when that happens. And so we'll oftentimes play interim, fractional, longer term engagements. And those tend to be a couple of people on the team going in because in my experience, being a fractional CMO, you only get so far. And if you can bring in all the other disciplines that I described, you can move so much faster. Like we can just be like a Swiss Army knife going through a business and spotting it, detecting it, getting the action plans, keeping people accountable. Because that's the other part is holding people accountable. When change is coming, no one likes change. No one likes it.
Yeah.
And so we've had to really become experts at facilitating the change that comes out of the plan. We're not McKinsey. We're not coming in to give you a big playbook, if you will. We're coming in to take what we learn, build the plans, and see it all the way through results. And then there's times where businesses, we hire the talent, we take a step back, let the teams do what they do, and then we might come back once a quarter and advise in a different way, which is reviewing where they are, where they've gone, where might they be getting off track on where they know they need to be, and then we'll step in and help out. So it all depends on where we are in the journey when we start to be engaged with a business, which is why until we're underneath the hood, we're very careful about what we recommend because we want to make sure it's data-driven, it's comprehensive, it's thorough, and it's got the wins along the way because that's really important for the teams to feel it as you go through change.
Just to understand a little bit more the model, let's assume that you're starting a new engagement, you conduct your audit, and then you see that, okay, this company has this gap or needs this capability. Would you be like almost recommending the people that they should bring in to fill
Yes.
that gap? How does that work? Do you have like a
Yes.
network of trusted?
Yes.
Okay, can you
That's
speak to that
exactly right.
maybe?
And agencies too. Sometimes things are in-house that don't belong in-house. And then there's some things where agencies are external that actually should be in-house capabilities. And so we will assess the whole stack of people and put the recommendation together, everything from the agencies. If there's outside parties we think could do the job better, and maybe the outside agencies come in to train up a group of people with our oversight. And then we are usually pretty involved in the hiring process. We are certainly not a human resources company, but we partner with organizations and we have access to people who might be contract to hire even. I mean, that's a reality too. Sometimes we'll put people in temporarily to see the balance and see how things are working to make progress happen. And then if the company really loves them, sometimes they get hired. So it's a pretty unique thing, I think, in our offering that we're not just building pretty decks and turning them over and saying, okay, team, now go figure it out. We're there to advise and to hold hands with people every step of the way.
Let's set the businesses you've been helping aside for a second. Let's talk about your business. What's, in your perspective, in your own business, the toughest challenge that you've had to overcome?
Well, I would say the toughest challenge for me was in the very early days because it was like staring at a blank piece of paper. And for me personally, many of those who work around me understand I'm terrified by a blank piece of paper. I love to write, I love to create, but boy, I'm a better editor than I am a start it from scratch writer on something. So for me, the hardest part was understanding my own gaps and saying, okay, I'm not going to do this alone. We're going to put some people around the table. We're going to invest earlier than I'm comfortable investing. Because if I don't, I'm never going to get off the ground and I'm going to sit and spin. So I quickly figured out who were the partners, the types of people I needed to have. And I'd say it's taken me the balance of 5 years to figure that part out. And we don't limit ourselves by saying we can only do X. When we see an opportunity, we'll bring talent in to work with us to build something out. And so I think feeling like I've got to be the unicorn and do it all myself is, if I don't do it, it won't get done. It took me a long time, good 2 years to get over that. And a lot of coaching. I had many coaches who I employed who helped me along the way to get over it and understand you got to let it go. And you got to bring other people. Otherwise, the box you're in now, if you really model out, here's where you really want to go and how you really want to serve companies. If your heart is in serving your customers, you don't get your ego mixed in it and think you have to do it all yourself. And so I think that that was a very hard challenge for me. And now I don't know what I would do without my partners. Honestly, they are all so amazing and bring such a different skill set. So that team dynamic that we have, which is, I always say, the genius is in the middle of us, because any one of us alone will never get where we get together. And plus, we have so much fun that way. But it took me a long time to get there. It really did.
What is next for Compass Rose Ventures? Like, what are your plans with the business? Where do you want to be in, say, the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, I would like to see us moving into a media business, continuing with consulting, and really creating education and value so that we can give more away to people who need it. So that instead of having to go into a company deeply in, we've got other services and tools and things that we're doing that don't require that, so that we can scale even more. And also, the use of technology in our business is significant. So we are innovating on some things that will be tools and things that can be used by more businesses, and ways that investors can keep better eyes on their portfolios and how they're performing. So there are less surprises. So we really want to push ourselves into the media and the technology and the data space, and have several different partners who are working with us on things right now that are on the go and in the midst of being created, because I think that's really where the opportunity is going to lie. It's in using the data, the technology, the tools, the same thing that we're doing for our clients one at a time. We want to be doing that for more instead of one at a time. We want to have offerings and services that are technology based and they're data based. So I'm very excited about the work on that front.
Speaking about education, is there any a resource or influence that you would cite in terms of what helped you in your career? Like, I don't know, it can be a person, a book, or a mentor, anything.
Well, there is a company that I would give a call out to who was pretty instrumental. When I look back, Brendan Bouchard has something called Growth Day. And I joined that community and I listen. I'm a podcast junkie, just am. I love learning. I love listening. I like it almost more than music in some ways. And so there are several people who I feel like they're my mentors, though I've never met them in person. And Brendan would be one of them. That being a part of his community gave me access to so many different people who shared the challenges that I have personally as I was going through building this business. So in the early days, I invested quite a bit, I'd say, in myself for the connections, so that it wasn't just me, myself, and I. And by participating in those communities and showing up and learning and engaging and going in the little meeting rooms in the midst of COVID with people and learning from each other, that really stimulated a lot for me. And today I still listen, always listen. And there's a period of time where I went through a program called Consulting for Success. That's another one that I would put on the books, that I had a tremendous coach there whose name is Brian. And he helped me take what I thought was complicated around sales and marketing and trim it down for me, which was really wonderful to have him there. And he kept me on a straight path with making sure I kept the focus right. Because he used to always call me the Energizer Bunny, like, you could do anything, but you got to make sure you're focused towards your goals. And so that was really wonderful to have almost an accountability partner in him and to have his coaching. So I will forever be grateful for those two resources.
And on a slightly different note here, I just want to say that you don't just consume podcasts, but you also have your own media, right? So, like,
Yes.
why don't you tell us a few words about this?
Oh, I'd love to. So a couple of years ago, I got really fascinated by a podcast called The Story of a Brand. with Ramon Villa. And, through my LinkedIn direct messaging and following and watching and listening to the guests on his show, I just thought, wow, these are all people I would really want to meet. And a little word about me early in my career, I admired Barbara Walters. I'm dating myself, I get that, and Oprah Winfrey. And I really, really wanted to be a journalist. I thought that's what I was going to do. So that's where my career began. I set out down the journalism path. And I'd say that is still with me here today with all the storytelling. But I've always fascinated to learn from people. So when Ramon and I were talking, somehow we got to know each other and we were having a conversation, and he just said, what about hosting a podcast? Would you do it with me? And so I am a co-host with Ramon, and we love the work that we do together because we get to meet really interesting people. And it's also a great way for connecting with those, sharing with them, but it's also building the network by having that podcast because it attracts people who are interested in the same topics as we are, which is putting great brands who are mission-based, who are thoughtful and purposeful in what they're doing and getting their journeys out into the spotlight so that other people can learn from them. So it's kind of a community in my mind aspect. Like that's why I do the podcast piece, is to connect people. And then when I'm working with clients, I'm able to bring and draw stories from the people I'm learning from on the podcast and from the podcast Ramon does. And then we're able to share those with our clients and help them. It's a big full circle to me on the educational side. So yeah, I'd love to do more of it because I just thoroughly enjoy interviewing people, and I have a curiosity that will just never be quenched. Let's put it that way.
Before I let you go, one last question. Is there any advice that you would give to people that would like to have a similar career to you, similar success to you, really?
Well, I would say number one, figure out as soon as you can what makes you unique. What is it that you do that no one else can do? And figuring out how to articulate that and knowing across your path how to position your skills in a way that delivers maximum value. And that doesn't mean you have to have your own business. It can even be in corporate America. And it's a big part. Like I always had the visions in my head of being clear, I'm good at this, not so good at that. And there's a period of time where I didn't understand that. And I wanted to do it all and clearly realized I'm not great at all of it. And that's okay. But the sooner in your career you can understand where you shine and get yourself positioned there and get your, I like to call it, I always had a board of advisors around me for me personally. And those advisors helped me overcome so many things and see around corners I couldn't see. So I'd say, along with knowing yourself really well, get to know yourself well, but get a group of advisors who can sponsor you, support you, spend time with you, mentor you. That to me is important. And some of my early days, the folks who I worked with or worked for, the coaches that I had, they're all still around, and I still look to them for advice quite a bit. So I'm forever grateful for that network and building it. And my daughter, who asks me frequently for advice, she's a freshman in college, and I keep telling her, studies are important, very important, but building your network and seeing the instructors the professors who you really admire, and go and take them to coffee, go learn from them, go build the network. Like that's the best thing you can do, combined with go get an internship. Don't be a perfectionist about things, just go do. Because in my experience, doing is better than sitting and thinking about it or dreaming about it. Just get out there, get going, just try things and see what you like and what you don't. That's my
Fantastic.
advice.
Thank you so much, Rose. It was really nice to speak with you today.
You too, George. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to be here.